I never thought a membership card could feel like a pulse. But the day I realized it was gone, something in me went quiet the way a porch light goes out, slowly, all at once. Bingo night had always been my small, electric Sunday. The fluorescent buzz of the senior center folded into my bones the moment I walked through the door, the smell of instant coffee, a chorus of voices calling B12 and G47, the clink of plastic chips, the soft applause when someone yelled bingo, and the entire room erupted like a little town parade. It wasn't just a game. It was where my friends knew my stories, where I taught Denise how to always pick consecutive numbers, where Harold saved me a seat and teased me when I wore my lucky cardigan. It was the little life I built after Harold passed, the life that kept me steady. I'm Joan, by the way. 72 years old. I raised 2 kids in Omaha, worked 3 jobs for a while, fed everyone through patchwork dinners, and learned early how to stretch $1 and a laugh. After I retired, bingo wasn't a pastime. It was my community. My calendar had little circles around every first and third Thursday. My daughter lives 2 states away. My son, Greg, lived close enough to complain about my casserole and far enough to forget to call sometimes. But he always brought me a box of crackers and a hug when he could, and for that I was grateful. So when I walked down to the senior center one crisp October and the desk lady blinked at me with an apologetic smile, I felt as if someone had slipped my heart into a coat pocket and walked away. "Mrs. Hill," she said, looking embarrassed and annoyed, I thought later. "We don't have you on the roster for tonight." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady because you learn to keep your voice calm in public. "I'm on the list." "Ask Harold." I stopped because Harold wasn't here anymore. "Ask Denise." "I come every month." She clicked through the computer with that kind of practiced annoyance people have when they're about to tell you inconvenient news. "Did you renew your membership, ma'am?" It was the wrong question. "I did," I said. "Of course I did." She sighed. "There's no record. If you want to play, there's a walk-in fee." She said the amount like she wanted me to blush. A walk-in fee. $50. $50 when my Social Security check arrives in a week and I've already promised half of it for roof repair. I felt lightheaded. "No, thank you. I'll come back next month." I walked to my car with my head down like I was carrying something heavy, a grocery bag full of shame, a mail envelope of forgetfulness. When I reached the curb, my hands were shaking. The parking lot lights blurred into little suns. On the drive home, Greg called. He always called on Thursday nights sometimes, out of habit, or guilt, or the way men do when they know a woman is alone. "Hey, Ma," he said, jovial. "How's it going?" I managed a laugh that wanted to be normal. "Well, it's going," I said. "Went down to play bingo and—" "You what?" He sounded distracted, like a man balancing 100 small plates. "You didn't bring me any of those rolls of yours?" I swallowed. "No, Greg. I didn't play." There was a pause. "Oh, sorry, Ma. I meant to." His voice shifted like someone rearranging boxes. "Did you renew your membership?" "They sent an email last month." "An email?" I felt the floor tilt. "Greg," I said carefully, "I didn't get an email." "Well, I checked your account last week. I thought I handled that for you." He flashed that explanation like a card trick. "I was short on time with work." "Don't worry about it." "Greg," I said slower. "Did you renew it? Or did someone else?" "You're getting picky, Mom." "I took care of it." He chuckled, and there was that tone again, the one that says he's already moving away. I didn't tell him the senior center said otherwise. I didn't tell him about the $50 walk-in fee or how my hands had trembled waiting for the bus home. I just said, okay. Thanks. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table with the cabinet light on, the radio low, and my bingo card forgotten on the counter like an unfinished prayer. That night, the house echoed. I replayed the conversation, found myself measuring words the way I'd measured flour for years. Had he really forgotten? Had he really checked my account? Or had Greg, distracted Greg, let it lapse? Or worse, had he let it lapse on purpose? You can rationalize a lot the first time your place in someone's life shifts. You can say, oh honey, they're busy. You can tell yourself men forget because they're juggling work. But doubt creeps in soft as dust and then starts to settle. The next morning I woke up early and walked to the mailbox because if there was an email they'd sent, maybe a paper notice had come accidentally, I wanted to see it. The envelope with the community center logo did not wait for me. There were only coupons and a pamphlet for lawn care. The silence in the mailbox felt deliberate. All week I watched for small, ordinary things, Greg's truck pulling in and out without his face in the window, the way his voice tightened when I mentioned the center. At church on Sunday, his hands lingered on the pew rail like he was rehearsing what to say. My daughter, Lisa, called from out west and said, Mom, if you need the money, tell me. I can send a little extra. God bless Lisa, across the miles she always knows what to say. But I didn't call Lisa. I wanted to figure this out myself. I'd spent a life making things right with my own two hands. I was not about to let my need be someone else's burden. You have to understand something about bingo. It's not trivia. It's not silence. Bingo is community. It's the woman who brought you to the hospital when you fell off the ladder in '98. It's the man who clapped the loudest when you finally sang at the church recital. They're people who visit one another, who bring casseroles, who call when you're sick. For me, the membership card was a small key to that door. When the days passed and nothing changed, I tried to speak to Greg again. I asked him plainly at dinner, in that way mothers have that calls the child by his name as if you are reaching for the boy you used to tuck in bed. Greg, honey, did you renew my membership? He looked at me the way a man looks at a complicated instruction manual. I thought I did. Honestly, Ma, I thought I did. I don't want the money, I said. I like being there. It keeps me with people. Mom, he said, annoyed now, subtle, but the kind of annoyance that's a razor. You worry too much. I'll check it. I'll call them tomorrow. He didn't call. He didn't call for days. You learn how to read those silences after a while. They're not empty, they're a kind of answer. At first I started telling myself it was forgetfulness. Maybe the renewal had been on his list and it slipped. People forget appointments, car tags, sometimes even anniversaries. I told myself that generosity of spirit thing. Then, on a slow Tuesday, I dropped by Greg's place just to say hi and to bring him some of those rolls he liked. He opened the door like he'd been waiting on the porch for someone less complicated. His girlfriend, no, fiancé now, came into the hallway, hair perfect, shoes pristine, and called him babe in a voice that made my tongue feel like an old coin. Hey, Mom, she said, Jenna, that was her name, smiling in a way that made me try to like her harder. I set the pan on the counter. Just thought I'd see if Greg needed anything picked up from the store. I fumbled, moving to put the pan down. Actually, I was just on my way to the center, I said, then stopped. To say I was on my way would be a lie. I couldn't go. I couldn't walk in like someone who belonged when the card that said I didn't exist. Oh, Jenna said, polite but not. My sister told me the center's having a membership drive. Maybe you missed the email? I felt the floor tilt again. Maybe, I said. I smiled like someone who's practiced smiling so much her cheeks hurt. That night I sat at the kitchen window and watched the streetlights bloom. I thought of the laugh lines around Harold's eyes and how he never would have let this slide. I thought of the neatness of Jenna's shoes, of her phone buzzing like a small insect all evening, and I began to stitch possibilities together the way I'd stitched old quilts, careful, patient, stubborn. If you're hearing this and you're feeling that cold prick of recognition, if someone you trusted forgot or forgot on purpose, hit the like button and subscribe. Stories like these keep us from being invisible. Because here's the thing, sometimes being forgotten is accidental, and sometimes it's a choice. And the line between the two is the longest walk you ever take in a house that used to be full of voices. By the time the leaves had turned and the first frost bit the edges of Omaha's lawns, I had a new routine. I picked my phone up more, I checked the bank account that paid for my small pleasures, and I watched for patterns. I started making small notes in a spiral notebook about when Greg left for work, how often Jenna was in the house, and whether membership renewal and bingo were phrases that popped up on Greg's calendar. I was taking the first steps toward noticing. Not everyone would call that bravery. Some would call it suspicion. Some would call it a mother's worry. But when an important small thing vanishes from your life, your bridge to other people, you owe it to yourself to ask why. That night I folded my bingo card into my wallet like a promise. I would not let my door close without knocking, and I would not be shoved to the shadows of my own life. They say age brings patience. But nobody tells you that patience sometimes feels a lot like waiting for a storm you can smell but can't yet see. After that night at Greg's, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over the conversation in my mind, Jenna's words, that little lilt when she said, maybe you missed the email, as if I were too old to understand technology, too slow to keep up. It wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't say. See, I might be 72, but I'm not the fool some people mistake for sweet. I've lived through loss, inflation, and the kind of loneliness that could swallow a person whole. I can tell when a lie has perfume on it. The next morning, I made a decision. I dusted off my old laptop, the one with the broken end key and a sticker from my late husband's fishing club, and I logged into my email. Or at least, I tried. The password didn't work. That was strange. I'd been using the same one for 5 years. I tried again, slower this time. Nothing. My heart started to beat that slow, dreadful drum. Then, I saw it, a message at the top of the login screen. Your password was changed 28 days ago. I froze. The only other person who had access to my passwords, because I'd written them neatly in a notebook and left them just in case, was Greg. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. It was during one of those pandemic months when everyone was talking about online scams and tech help. Greg had said, "Mom, let me help you reset all your logins so you don't get hacked." And I'd trusted him. Because he was my son. So when that message appeared, it felt like someone had stolen my diary and torn out the pages. I called him. It rang 6 times before he answered. "Hey, Ma, what's up?" I tried to keep my tone light. Just trying to log into my email. Looks like someone changed the password. He chuckled like it was nothing. "Oh yeah, I updated it for you last month." Too many spam messages. I've been meaning to tell you. Spam messages? I repeated, already feeling my breath tighten. Yeah, all those newsletters and bingo reminders, Mom. You never read them anyway. I figured I'd clean it up for you. My mouth went dry. He'd cleaned it up. I sat there in silence for a moment, staring at the photo of Harold on my mantel. He'd been gone 6 years now, but I could almost hear him, that quiet, stern voice that said, "Don't let them talk circles around you, Joni." "Greg," I said finally, "you deleted my emails?" There was a pause. "Not all of them. Just the junk." "Greg, my friends send me those bingo updates. Denise emails me church potluck flyers. That's not junk." He sighed. "Mom, you're overreacting. I'm trying to simplify things for you. You get overwhelmed sometimes." Overwhelmed? My voice cracked. It wasn't anger yet, it was disbelief. "Mom," he said softly, that rehearsed softness that's worse than shouting, "I just want to help you." "By deleting my life?" I whispered. He laughed, short and sharp. "It's just email, Mom." And then, click. He hung up. That night, I sat by the kitchen window, hands around my coffee mug like it was the only warm thing left in the room. The silence was so heavy it felt like company. The thought kept circling in my mind, he didn't just delete spam. He deleted me. The next day, I decided to see for myself. I walked over to the community center. The new receptionist, younger than my granddaughter, smiled politely as I explained the situation. She tapped on the computer, then looked up at me with that practiced pity. "Mrs. Hill," she said, "your membership was canceled online 3 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. Canceled? I repeated. By who? She frowned. "It says here, account closed per family request." Family request. My lips trembled as I read the screen. The name next to the request wasn't mine, it was Greg Hill. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air around me felt too small, too thin. The girl said something, I think she was offering me a chair, but I couldn't hear her. I just kept staring at the name I'd written on his birth certificate with hands trembling from joy. My son had erased me, not just from email, not just from the bingo hall, but from a small part of the world where I was still seen. That night, I sat on the porch, looking out at the empty street. There was a chill in the air, and the neighbor's dog barked in the distance. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and tried to understand why. Was it money? Embarrassment? Control? Or was it the slow decay of love that happens when people start seeing their elders as burdens instead of blessings? I didn't know. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, I went to the library. I sat at one of the public computers, logged into my newly created email, this time with a password only I knew, and started searching. I typed in Omaha Community Senior Center membership renewal. And there it was, the form, the payment history, the audit log. My old email address was linked to a canceled transaction. The note read, "Request for refund approved. Amount, $150. Refund." Greg had gotten a refund. I scrolled further. The account linked to the refund wasn't mine. It was his. That's when my hands started shaking. I printed the page. I folded it neatly. I put it in my purse next to the church pamphlet I always carried, the one about forgiveness. Funny thing about forgiveness, it always seems simple until you're the one who has to give it. That night, Greg came by. Jenna was with him. She brought a pie, the kind from the store, in one of those aluminum tins that pretend to be homemade. "Hey, Mom," Greg said, his tone casual, as if nothing had happened. "Come on in," I said, smiling just enough to make it believable. They sat at the table. I poured coffee. "So," I began softly, "the senior center says my membership was canceled." Greg blinked. "Oh. Yeah. They messed up. I'll fix it next week." I looked him straight in the eye. "Greg," I spoke to them. "They said you canceled it. And got a refund." The silence that followed could have cut glass. Jenna looked up, surprised, maybe even guilty. Greg's face flushed. "Mom, it's complicated." "No," I said gently, "it's not." He shifted in his seat. "You don't need to waste money on bingo. You should be saving that cash." Jenna and I held up my hand. "Stop. You took my money, Greg." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jenna looked down at her pie, suddenly quiet. And that's when I realized he wasn't embarrassed. He was angry that I'd found out. I let the silence hang between us like a heavy curtain. "Then," I said, "Greg, I raised you better than this." His jaw clenched. "You raised me to be practical." "No," I said softly. "I raised you to be good." When they left, I didn't cry right away. I just sat there at the table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where his laughter used to be. Then, as the porch light flickered on outside, I broke down. Not because of the money or the bingo card, but because I realized something much harder. He'd stopped seeing me as a person. That was the betrayal. Not the refund. Not the email. But the quiet, invisible erasure of a woman who once was his whole world. They say a mother's heart breaks quietly. But I learned that sometimes it doesn't break at all, it hardens. Not out of hate, but out of necessity. The night Greg and Jenna left my house, the wind was howling. The kind of wind that shakes shutters and reminds you how small you really are in this world. I sat there in the dark, the half-eaten pie still on the table, my hands resting on the paper I'd printed from the library, proof of what my own son had done. I stared at his name next to that refund transaction. It looked like any ordinary line of text. But to me, it was the final line between mother and son and stranger and thief. I thought about calling my sister, Martha. But she was the kind of woman who never let a secret stay secret. I wasn't ready for my pain to become family gossip. So instead, I poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee, sat by the window, and let the night talk to me. Outside, a porch light flickered. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm went off and stopped. And in between it all, there was this voice inside me, faint at first, that whispered, "You can't let this be the ending." I'd spent my whole life being the peacemaker. The one who forgave too easily, who believed that he didn't mean it was enough to excuse the hurt. But this time felt different. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. For the next week, I didn't call Greg. Didn't text. Didn't email. Instead, I started observing, quietly, like a detective in my own life. I noticed Jenna posting photos of their new backyard project on Facebook. A brand new patio set. Outdoor lights. A fancy grill that probably cost more than my car. And then, something small but cruel, she captioned one photo. Finally decluttering life, starting fresh, red heart. Decluttering. The same word Greg had used when he deleted my emails. The same tone Jenna had when she called my bingo cards junk mail. It hit me like a wave. They weren't just cutting me off. They were rebranding it. My existence was now clutter. I wanted to scream. But instead, I saved the photo. Because I knew, deep down, that one day it might come in handy. Days stretched into weeks. The phone stopped ringing. The house got quieter. I filled the silence with small noises, a radio humming old country songs, the kettle's whistle, the creak of floorboards under my slippers. Sometimes I'd drive past the senior center just to see the lights on. I could almost hear the laughter, the shuffling of bingo cards, the clinking of coffee cups. Those little sounds of community used to be my heartbeat. Now, they were a reminder of what had been stolen, not the game itself, but connection. It's strange how isolation feels when it's forced. When you choose solitude, it can be peaceful. But when someone chooses it for you, it becomes punishment. One afternoon, I got a call from Denise, my old bingo partner. "Joni, girl, where have you been? We miss you." My throat tightened. "Oh, I've just been taking a break." "Well," she said, "you should know they started a new game night. Big prizes." "Greg told the manager you weren't interested anymore, but I figured I'd call anyway." Greg told the manager I wasn't interested. That night, something inside me snapped. I went into Harold's old study, a room I hadn't touched since the funeral. The smell of cedar and tobacco lingered in the air. His desk still had that faint scratch where he used to set his coffee mug. I sat down, opened the drawer, and found his old leather notebook. Inside were notes from when he managed our finances, reminders for church bake sales, even a scribbled note that said, "Don't let Greg talk you into early retirement." I laughed through tears. Harold had seen this coming, in his quiet way. He'd always been the cautious one. The planner. And that's when the idea began to take shape. Revenge doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes, it's just letting people choke on their own lies, with a little nudge from the truth. I started small. First, I reopened my membership at the senior center, using my new email, my own bank account, and my maiden name. Joni Ray. They didn't even realize who I was. I was just another retired woman joining the Tuesday bingo group. And you know what? It felt freeing. Nobody there knew I'd been deleted. I laughed. I played. I even won once, a $20 grocery card. But the real prize was seeing my name, my own name, printed again on that member list. It was like reclaiming a part of myself. Next, I started talking. Quietly, but deliberately. I told a few mutual friends, the kind who loved to accidentally spread things, about how my son had accidentally canceled my membership. I didn't sound bitter, I sounded hurt. And that's a powerful thing, because people sympathize with pain, but they despise betrayal. Within 2 weeks, word got around. I noticed the shift when Jenna stopped posting family photos. I noticed Greg stopped commenting on my Facebook birthday posts. That's when I knew the truth was starting to leak. But I wasn't done. Even as my plan unfolded, I couldn't escape the heartbreak. Every morning, I'd wake up and wonder, what did I do wrong? Was it because I'd helped him too much? Or maybe not enough? Did I make him feel small by still being strong at my age? It's funny how mothers always assume they're to blame, even when they're the ones bleeding. Some nights, I'd drive to the diner on 46th and Maple, the one with the cracked red booths and the waitress who still calls everyone honey. I'd order a slice of lemon meringue pie, drink my coffee black, and watch the door. I half expected Greg to walk in and say sorry. But he never did. What I did get, though, was something unexpected. A man named Walter. He was a widower who sat at the counter, reading the paper and making corny jokes about crossword puzzles. One evening, he noticed me wiping away a tear and said, "Whoever made you cry better hope I never meet him." I laughed. The first real laugh in months. We started meeting at that diner every Thursday. Not dates, exactly. Just companionship. He reminded me that life didn't end at 70. It just required new company. And with every conversation, I grew a little bolder. A little stronger. By the third Thursday, I told Walter everything about Greg, the emails, the refund, the isolation. He listened without interrupting, just nodding, his hand occasionally brushing mine. When I was done, he said, "Joni, don't get even. Get smart." That's when the final piece of my plan clicked. I didn't need to yell, or beg, or demand. I just needed to let Greg's choices speak louder than my forgiveness. So, I started writing. A letter. Not to Greg, but to his employer. Greg worked at a financial consulting firm, the kind that prided itself on integrity and trust. And I happened to have documented proof that he'd accessed someone's private account without consent, mine. It wasn't about ruining him. It was about reminding him actions have consequences. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I folded it neatly, sealed it, and put it in my purse. Right next to Harold's old fishing club sticker. Because revenge, I learned, isn't about destroying someone. It's about reclaiming your power, one quiet choice at a time. First, I did something simple and a little theatrical. I reclaimed what was mine. I showed up at the senior center that Tuesday morning, not as a timid woman asking for favors, but as Joan Hill, member since 1999. I walked in with a bouquet of grocery store daisies and a steaming thermos of coffee wrapped in a dish towel, like I'd always done. The receptionist glanced up, saw my name on their printed list, and then on my face. For a moment she looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. "Mrs. Hill," she exclaimed, then realized how to say it properly. "We didn't know." "I know," I said, smiling. "There were some clerical errors. But I'm here now." Word travels fast in a building full of people who count stitches and remember birthdays. By the time the bingo cards were being handed out, Harold's old seat, the one he'd always saved for me, was pulled out and filled with laughter from people who'd missed me. Denise clapped me on the shoulder like she'd been waiting on the porch. Harold's younger sister, Mabel, brought over a carton of homemade rolls because that's what neighbors do. Seeing their faces was a kind of vindication. I'd reclaimed a room, yes, but I'd also reclaimed a community that Greg had thought was disposable. Next, I turned to the ledger I'd been keeping, the printed note from the library, the emails Tamika had helped me pull, the notations in my spiral notebook. I took everything to Etta, June, and the little team we'd assembled. We formatted the evidence into a neat packet, screenshots of Jenna's social posts with timestamps, the refund confirmation showing Greg's account, the notarized forgery receipts we'd found, and a timeline of cancellations and interactions. I made copies, one for the senior center, one for the school where my granddaughter was suddenly deauthorized, one for the bank, and one for Greg. I started by walking into Greg's office. It was a quiet, glass-sheathed place where people in suits pretended to have all the answers. I asked for him by name. The receptionist scanned my printed card, and a young assistant called him. He appeared like a man who'd been halfway through his day and suddenly had to be a son. He invited me into a small conference room, seat soft and chair too wide. He smiled the kind of smile people reserve for uncomfortable reunions. "Mom," he said, one syllable thick with practiced patience. "Is everything okay?" I placed the packet gently in front of him. "You tell me." He skimmed the first page, then another. His hands started to tremble like someone who just realized a mistake was a mighty cliff. "Mom, this is..." "You canceled my membership," I said. "You took my money. You removed my pickup permissions at Maya's school. You changed my email password." "Why, Greg?" He tried to justify it. "Help, efficiency, we were trying to protect you." But his justifications were tiny bridges built over a canyon. I could see where they would break. Then I did something he didn't expect. I said, "I'm not asking you to give me back the money. I'm asking you to explain why you thought I was disposable." He looked at me, eyes wide and wet, the man I'd raised shrinking into a boy. He said nothing. After leaving his office, I sent the bank a formal letter, copies of the fraudulent authorizations, the refund trail, and a request for an audit. I sent one to his employer, too, a calm, factual note asking whether the company had any policies about employees who abused elder family members' finances. I wasn't trying to ruin him, I was trying to make the people who mattered look at him differently. Remember Jenna's photo of the new patio set? The caption that read, "Finally decluttering life, starting fresh, Red Heart?" I saved it. I matched it with screenshots of the refund confirmation, with dates. I pulled together a timeline and set it beside Jenna's nursing receipts and store tags. I then wrote an honest letter to the local community newsletter, the one with crossword puzzles and church bake sale photos, describing how precious community spaces help seniors stay connected, and how sometimes families forget the little things that matter. I didn't use inflammatory language. I described what happened: a membership canceled, a refund processed, a grandmother left out. I included screenshots, politely redacted personal bank numbers, and left a note: if you know a senior who seems suddenly invisible, check in. Sometimes helping means keeping someone out. The piece ran the next week under the soft headline, "When Community Fades, a Reminder to Check on Our Elders." People wrote letters in response, and one woman called me to say she'd seen Greg at the hardware store buying a patio umbrella. Another neighbor texted a photo of Jenna's Instagram post with a sad face emoji. The quiet, kind-hearted readers of that newsletter began to gossip, and gossip in small towns can be louder than a siren. Within days, a coworker of Greg's called me cautiously, admitting they'd heard something and asking if it was true. The company started to whisper. Jenna's carefully curated feed started to look tone-deaf when contrasted with the story that was spreading. She muttered about privacy and overreach, but when people looked at her posts and then at the evidence, the cognitive dissonance was visible. Jenna had removed me from Maya's pickup list. That felt like a knife. You take away a grandmother's ability to pick up her grandchild, and you isolate her from the daily rhythms of being a grown-up who still matters. I scheduled a meeting at the school. I walked in with June and a polite folder of paperwork, and the principal, a woman whose face looked like it had been built for problem-solving, sat us down. I explained calmly that I'd been removed without my consent. I showed the notarized statement that had my signature and the purchase/payment trail connecting Greg's account. The principal frowned, then made some calls. The school system has a way of moving fast when children's safety is concerned. Within the hour, my emergency pickup rights were reinstated, pending an investigation. The principal also called social services to flag potential elder financial abuse. That call alone was a lever that shifted the power balance in ways I couldn't have predicted. Social services sent a visitor within the week, curious and professional, and asked questions that made Jenna flush and stammer. When someone in an official uniform comes to your door with a clipboard and a direct question, it's harder to maintain a performance. I wasn't naive. I knew Greg could still be defensive. But I wanted a confrontation that had the weight of consequence, not theatricality. I invited Greg and Jenna to lunch. I told them I wanted to clear the air for Maya's sake. I could have chosen to scream, to throw things. Instead, I chose silence first. I let the weight of the past week sit between us like a physical thing. We ate quietly. Then I slid the printed timeline across the table: bank refunds, email password change, school deauthorization, Jenna's posts. I watched Greg's face go ashen. He stammered, tried to say he'd been protecting me, that bingo was frivolous, that the money could be better used. Jenna's eyes darted away. I used to fold your shirts, I told him then, remembering childhood mornings, the smell of starch and cheap aftershave. I used to soothe the fever that made you weak. I taught you to tie your tie. You learned to ride a bicycle because I ran behind you. You were never a burden. He looked down, shame breaking through the armor. Mom, You made a choice, I said softly. You chose to profit off your mother's small joys. You chose to hide it. There was a long silence. Greg looked like a man who'd run his hand over his face and found it was made of paper. He apologized, halting, inadequate, but he said the words. Apologies matter if they come with action. He agreed to attend mediation, to meet with a counselor, to repay the refunded amount to my account. He was worried, mostly, about his job after HR called him in. I watched the fear in his eyes and felt both sorrow and the strange relief of seeing a man finally face his choices. I didn't scheme for karma the way a novel does. I set truth in motion and let it do its thing. But there were moments, small, brilliant, that felt like the universe offering a tidy, satisfying ripple. A week after the public letter ran, Jenna posted a sun-drenched photo of the patio table, with a caption about life changes. What she didn't post was the news that a dear colleague at her job had read the piece and privately suggested she needed to do some soul work. Business connections matter in small towns. People drink from the same cups and dine at the same fundraisers. Her manager, who values reputation, offered her a performance improvement plan that frightened her more than any online SaaS. People who cultivate a perfect life on social media don't like public scrutiny. Greg's boss called him into HR again. They made it clear, we don't tolerate misuse of family authority in personal matters that affect community trust. I don't know what that meant for Greg in long-term terms. But I know this, the man who used to joke about his mother's hoarding habits now stopped making those jokes. The best revenge beauty is not exposure, it's restoration. Within a month, the senior center held a little welcome back tea. They presented me with a handmade card from the group and a small plaque that read, in honor of Joan Hill, for bringing joy, cakes, and stories. Denise cried when she pinned it. Harold's sister sang off-key, "You are my sunshine." I laughed until my ribs burned. Walter came to the tea, wearing a jacket that had seen better autumns. He hugged me in a way that was neither pity nor romance, just the steady presence of a man who'd seen someone rebuild. Maya climbed up on my lap at the table and smudged jam on my cheek. It was messy and perfect. I also got one other thing, an email from Greg's company. Not a firing notice, but a request for mediation and proof that he had repaid the refund and taken elder financial abuse training. He'd done the work. It wasn't all restoration, repair takes time, but it was a step. I didn't want vengeance that destroyed me, or them. I wanted dignity. I wanted community. And most of all, I wanted to be seen. The moves I made weren't dramatic stunts, they were small, steady, and true. I used evidence, neighbors, institutions, and the small incendiary power of truth. Greg and Jenna learned that the casual erasures of a life have consequences. I learned I'm not fragile because I'm older, I'm just seasoned. I learned how to turn a ledger into a lifeline, how to turn gossip into armor, and how to let institutions do the heavy lifting of consequence. And when Maya tucked her little hand into mine after a game of bingo and whispered, "You won again, Mimi," that little victory tasted like everyday justice. It wasn't loud. It was enough. They say revenge feels sweet. But sitting on my porch that fall morning, watching the light turn golden over my faded geraniums, I realized it wasn't sweetness I felt. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you only earn after chaos. The kind that hums, not because the world is perfect, but because you survived it. A month after the confrontation, things began to shift. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but like the slow change of seasons. Greg stopped calling me out of obligation and started calling me out of guilt. Then, out of love. The difference was in his tone. He began driving me to appointments again, no more excuses about meetings or traffic. He'd show up early, carrying my grocery bags as if the weight could wash away what he'd done. Jenna kept her distance for a while. The newsletter had humbled her in a way that words couldn't. But one afternoon, she showed up at my door with a nervous smile and a pan of lasagna. She didn't apologize right away, she just asked if I had a spare minute. We sat in my kitchen, two women who had shared a man's life in different ways. Her voice cracked when she finally said, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Joan. I felt like everything in this house was about what came before me. I thought clearing things out meant making space for us." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, gently, "You don't make room for your future by erasing your past." Her eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table and touched my hand. For the first time, I saw not a rival, but a woman, one who'd been scrambling to matter in a world that told her she had to be perfect to be loved. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It came in small, human steps, a shared meal here, a ride for Maya there, a text message that said thinking of you today. The senior center became my second home again. I started hosting Tuesday night games, complete with homemade cookies and my old thermos of coffee. Laughter filled those halls again. The staff even asked me to help organize community fundraisers for senior outreach, ironic, given that I'd once been their forgotten member. Walter was there most evenings, sitting a little too close when the room got chilly. I didn't mind. We'd built something soft and steady, a companionship rooted in mutual understanding. Two souls who knew the price of loneliness, learning that it was okay to smile again. One night, he leaned over during a particularly tense round and said, "You ever think you'd come back stronger than the folks who tried to take you down?" I chuckled, eyes on my card. "Walter, I didn't come back stronger. I just came back me. And that's enough." He grinned, and wouldn't you know, I yelled bingo right after that. The room erupted in applause. Later that winter, I found my old notebook, the one where I'd written every detail of my investigation. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. I opened it instead. Page after page told the story of a woman who refused to disappear. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a roadmap back to myself. I'd spent years defining my worth by how much I gave: meals, time, love, patience. But that notebook reminded me that sometimes the bravest thing you can give is a no. No, you don't get to treat me like a burden. No, you don't get to decide what joy I'm allowed. No, you don't erase me for convenience. Aging doesn't make us fragile, it makes us sharper. We've seen too much to fall for flattery and survived too much to settle for silence. It was late on a Sunday when my phone buzzed. Greg's name glowed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "You free for dinner next weekend? Maya's been asking for your chili." My heart clenched. Not out of sadness, but relief. It was the first normal invitation in years. No guilt, no tension, just love. I said yes. Then he added, "I signed us up for that family therapy thing. I want to get it right this time." And for the first time, I believed him. The seasons turned, as they always do. Spring brought tulips. Summer brought heat and laughter. Life didn't suddenly sparkle, but it glowed. I found new friends, joined a book club, even took a water aerobics class. And sometimes, when I'd be alone with my thoughts, I'd whisper a little prayer of gratitude, not for the pain, but for what it taught me. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't end you. It refines you. I learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook, it's about setting yourself free from their shadow. I learned that starting over at 68 isn't pathetic, it's powerful. And I learned that even when your own child forgets who you are, you can still remember yourself. If you've been sitting there with a lump in your throat, if this story reminds you of your own pain, please hear this. You are not invisible. You are not too old to start again. And you sure as hell are not done. Family can hurt us deeper than anyone, but healing isn't about them, it's about reclaiming your joy, your voice, and your peace. So if this hit home, go ahead, like this video, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments. I read them all, and I promise, you're not alone. Next time, we'll talk about a grandma's heirlooms stolen by her own blood, and how she turned that heartbreak into hope. You don't want to miss that one. Until then, this is Joan Hill, signing off with one truth I wish every woman knew. Getting older doesn't mean fading away. It means glowing brighter in your own damn light.